and welcome back. I'm Richie Stone in for BKP this hour. He is on assignment. It is 9:39 here in beautiful Ellijay, Georgia. So I'm not sure if you guys heard, but there were two shootings this past weekend. One in El Paso and one in Dayton, Ohio. Obviously, a little sarcasm there. Of course, you've heard about the shootings. It's all we've heard about. And as day follows the night, within 12 hours, we had Democrats saying that it was the president's fault. And by Monday, it was, people who voted for him's fault. And by today, we're basically a country overrun by the KKK and white supremacist, white nationalist, and any other word they choose that they have made up since Trump became president or a candidate. So the issue's been beat to death, and we've gotten in this situation where no matter what, whenever something like this happens, it becomes about gun control or red flag laws or background checks or my personal favorite, the gun show loophole, which every time someone says there's a gun show loophole, you can pretty much guarantee they've never been to a gun show and tried to buy a gun. And it's the same thing over and over again. David Hogg resurfaces. I think he's up at Harvard. Interesting how he was able to parlay tragedy into a first-class education. The typical people resurface. The people on Twitter, the leftists, get angry and start blaming the NRA. CNN has a town hall tomorrow. I mean, it's the same thing over and over again. You see the mainstream media, the drive-bys, as Rush calls them. You see them show up on site, ready to get any kind of story they can of a victim or show heartbreaking graphic pictures just to make people sad. I mean, it sounds crazy, but if you know how this industry works, it's you want eyes on the TV, you want to attract viewers, and of course CNN needs them badly right now because their ratings have fallen off a cliff. So this scenario happens where, it's almost like these people are happy about it, and it's sad, it's devastating to see how whenever a tragedy strikes, the side of the political aisle that sees it as an opportunity is what always kind of befuddled me about the left and the right when I was coming up and didn't really I didn't really know which way I leaned politically and how I would be as an adult. And that's one thing that has always stuck with me. And we saw it before. We saw it when Obama was president with whatever shooting would happen or tragedy, and how immediately the left would turn it into like their cause, and they would use it to make people think that gun owners were bad people, and even with the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, which I didn't personally agree with, especially toward the end, but the way they would use the deaths of soldiers to go after Bush and everything that entailed. So seeing it now, fast forward to today, and what we're seeing with CNN, MSNBC, the Sunday shows, which I'm sure Brian got into on Monday, but having Beto O'Rourke, who lost to Ted Cruz, quit the Congress, no longer a representative of El Paso, quit the Congress because he thought he was going to be a senator. He obviously lost. And he's Mr. Cool, says the F word on stage and skateboards and all this. And decided to run for president, which most people think he has no shot. Which of course, we've all learned never to say no, never say someone has no shot. But he was in Vegas on Saturday, and as the news broke, they went straight to him in Vegas, and his eyes lit up, and I'm not going to say it was phony, but it was like his big opportunity to act and get his name relevant again. And some of the things he said, neo-Nazis and white supremacy, and that anyone who supports Trump, suggesting that anyone who supports the president is that way. And then last night, Don Lemon on CNN was basically making the point that if someone, he was talking to John Kasich, old 1 for 52 Kasich, said that they made the point that, okay, well, if you talk about the economy, you're just ignoring that we have a country full of KKK members, which I've never even seen a KKK person except on Jerry Springer. Neo-Nazis, I've only seen neo-Nazis on MSNBC, ironically enough, on that show on the weekends, the prison show. So, they love to present things in a manner that put a wedge, especially in Trump's base. And here's what I mean by that. In politics in this country, everything is always presented from a standpoint of, well, it's the Republicans to lose, right? The Republicans have to, or it's the Democrats' race to lose. Everything is, no matter what cycle it is, no matter what history tells us about incumbencies and third terms, and what happens after in a midterm of a first term president. No matter what, it's always, oh well, the Democrats are gonna win, but if they lose, it's all either someone cheated or the country's racist. I mean, the last 3 Republican presidential elections, whether it be Bush Gore or Russia collusion or Ohio exit polls, there's always some reason to explain away why they lost. They never actually lose, you know what I mean? And in reality, the narrative they give is the opposite. They will never tell you, they'll never admit that right now they're in trouble for 2020. The president had a lot of momentum this summer, and including last week, being able to have a strong economy, job growth, to the point where people are so busy living their lives now that the Great Depression of Obama's over, that they're not really locked in on politics. So when something like this happens, it forces people to see it because it's such a tragedy, and they treat it as if it's an opportunity to really over-exaggerate things, to put a wedge in the Republican base because they know they have to do that to win. Look back to 2018. I was talking to a political insider, a friend of mine down in Atlanta, and we were talking about specifically the District 6 in Congressional District 6 that Karen Handel held but lost to gun activist Lucy McBath. And to hear it now, Lucy McBath is known as the gun control advocate that got elected, and that she's a sign of progress because a Republican district not only elected a Democrat, but they elected a gun control advocate, which couldn't be, well, I guess technically it's true, but when that general election cycle happened, Lucy McBath dropped the issue of gun control. She quit talking about it. It wasn't on her ads. It was all about health care. And it's something that was not at the forefront of people's mind. This is one of the better examples of my overall point here. She didn't mention it, right? I mean, she mentioned it maybe if she was fundraising or with a friendly crowd, but when it came to television ads or radio ads or debate, she would lighten her stance and say, well, common sense gun control or background checks, and would really really forgot the issue altogether. Yet when she won, when she won the election, she got to Congress, and it was like, oh, Georgia elected this, great fighter for gun laws. And Josh, do you mind hitting the cough button real quick? Do you mind hitting the cough button? I gotta clear my throat. Got a little froggy there. I don't get to talk. I don't get to do this much anymore, so I got to build up the stamina. So when McBath finally won, you saw her doing all of this national media and talking about gun laws, and within a week, her and Pelosi on stage together talking about their gun control plans, and it wasn't what she really ran on, but they presented it if she did. Once the election happens and she's in there, they can tell the story however they want. They can make it out to be something it wasn't. This happens all the time. And in particular with that race, Lucy McBath only won by 1 percentage point, right? Throughout the campaign, the polling indicated that Karen Handel was up by 1 point until the last week of October. And it shifted to where McBath went up by 1 point. And the interesting thing about that, what happened during that week, was when the fake bombs went to CNN. I say fake bombs meaning, they were bombed. They looked like real bombs, but they weren't real. They weren't explosive. They were designed to scare people. So when all of that happened and CNN, 10 alarm fire, had everybody out on the street doing live broadcasts, making it very dramatic. Meanwhile, Jim Acosta took a selfie with it, and I don't know if we can find that picture on the internet, but if we can put it above my shoulder over here, that'd be interesting. Just to get an idea that if they were really scared of a bomb, why are they that close to it? But that issue drove a wedge within the Republican Party. Right before the midterm elections, that issue was able to get more moderate Republicans to say to themselves, you know what, I don't want to be associated with some guy with Trump stickers all over his van. I don't want to be associated with white nationalism or whatever far right conspiracy theory they're floating about the country and about the people who voted for Donald Trump. And it worked. It worked in some areas where the margin for victory was razor thin for Democrats. And that's when the polling turned. So you got to wonder, now that we have this in El Paso and Dayton, Ohio, you got to wonder if they're not thinking in their minds that they have the same opportunity to do that, to just push and make, because, we're here almost a week later, and it's still leading the news there. They still have people on location in both areas. And, now the story is, I saw the Chiron on CNN today, Trump not welcome in El Paso. Now, who gets to declare that? He's the president of the United States. I mean, would the president of Mexico be welcome? Because they're giving him lots of favorable coverage. I saw a headline that said Mexican president strikes back at Trump, and it's like they're on his side here. They don't want to acknowledge anything that he does, and even when he decried he went out there the other day and gave his speech and said all the necessary things that they want him to say, and guess what? It wasn't enough. It never is enough. If he didn't go to El Paso, they'd say, where's our president? See, he doesn't care about them. It's heads I win, tails you lose with them. And it's just so frustrating because it's obvious that they want to use tragedy, like the old Bill Clinton quote, I think it was, never let a good tragedy go to waste, where they want to divide the base going into 2020, get people on board with the left, and and do things in the name of safety, or do things in the name of togetherness. I mean, you even have Obama come out, and this is this is hilarious to me. Every time he chimes in, which I think I can count 6 or 7 times he's chimed in on something. Notice they always preface it with, well, he rarely, President Obama, who rarely adds his opinion, or President Obama issued a statement, which is rare for him. No, it's not rare. It happens all the time. I mean, we're getting to the point where it's like actually a pretty regular thing where he chimes in on things, but they always it's almost like they're told to say that, which they are, because I think it's on a teleprompter. But that's neither here nor there. So within hours, we knew a lot about the El Paso shooter. He traveled a long way. It was racially motivated. The guy was obviously a sick individual, and if proven guilty, I hope they execute him in Texas, and I think that's the plan. But for some reason, we don't know anything about the Dayton shooter. Now, if you go through their social media profiles, you find that the Dayton shooter was a Elizabeth Warren supporter, hardcore leftist. Maybe that's why we don't know anything. Maybe that's why they're still saying, oh, we have no motive for the shooting in Dayton. That's because they don't want to look into it. They don't want to view him as one of them. Whereas I think a lot of us on the right, we look at them all as sick people. They're all messed up. It's all part of a bigger problem. It's not something that fits into a narrative. It's something that is actually quite sad, because it's reflective of a generation of young people who, for whatever reason, whether it be loneliness or not being able to succeed in life, not being able to feel like they're part of something, whether it be because of the way our culture has so quickly evolved into a social media fantasy world where you don't really have any human contact with people, to where you're to where your only friends are on your telephone screen on Facebook and social media, and you see everyone else out there living these lives that just seem so glamorous, because that's all you see is when people post things of the beach, or on top of the Empire State Building, or traveling around the world once a week, and the sense of despair that creates. And it's something that obviously I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert, but there's just so many little things you notice that has created this sense of depression, really, for lack of a better word, of amongst young people, young men. And it's a cultural degradation, if that makes sense. It's something that when I see it from 30,000 feet, when I take a step back and try to assess it, it's something that you got to wonder if all these people are like, oh, toxic masculinity, and wanting men to not be men. You got to wonder if that plays a role. You got to wonder if the people who are yelling the loudest about white males, or I'm trying to be delicate here, you got to wonder if they're not the ones that are creating this sense of despair, and making people feel as if they're the bad guy, and being told they're the bad, because we have a whole new generation of folks, going back to what we were talking about with school, where they're growing up in a system where social issues are taking the forefront, and they're being told they're the bad guy. They're being told they're what's wrong with the world. They're what's wrong with America. And just as it would with anyone, if your identity is hammered home your whole life as something that is a problem, and that you don't deserve to have a voice. You don't deserve to, you know, pursue happiness. You're the problem. What do you think's going to happen? These people, they're going to believe it. And I mean, like I said before, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on it, but it's sad to me how these political narratives and these cultural narratives that have been created in the name of political narrative, in the name of progress and creating these catchphrases and slogans in order to reach a political end, whether it be after a tragedy or whether it be on a campus, a college campus, a high school campus now, because all those kids that were in college are now teachers, the ones that chose to stay in it, that you got to wonder what effect that has on society, and you got to wonder if we can't just be normal anymore. But that's going to do it for me. We are approaching the top of the hour. It's been good being with you this hour. I'm Richie Stone, in for BKP. I hope you guys have a good one, and I'll see you when I see you.